What does it mean to carry a shadow that knows your heart's hidden fears? To hold a thing so small it lies unseen in a pocket yet so vast it bends the soul toward silence, in the quiet of a hobbit's life where joy and dread weave like threads. In a loom a question rises, soft as a whisper in the dusk, yet heavy as stone. How did Frodo Baggins, of all creatures, find the strength to enter Mordor, to tread a land where hope falters and the air chokes with ash, bearing the one ring to its fiery doom? This is not a saga of heroes clad in glory, nor of triumphs etched in towers of stone. It is a tale of a single path walked by a small hand that held the weight of worlds, a heart that trembled yet did not break. To walk this path, we must wander not through the wide realms of Middle-earth, but through the shadowed corners of a soul. Frodo's soul, and perhaps our own. For Middle-earth is no far-off land. It is the echo of our longings, the mirror of our burdens. And the ring, that circle of gold burning with a light no star can rival, is no mere jewel. It is the weight of desire, the murmur of temptation, the shadow that speaks when the world is still. Let us begin in the Shire, where the earth sings of peace, where life pulses with the rhythm of seasons, the warmth of hearths, the laughter of friends beneath a twilight sky. Here Frodo Baggins was born, a creature of gentle delights, his days woven from simple threads, mornings of tea and fresh-baked bread, afternoons lost in tales, evenings aglow with pipe smoke and song. Yet within him stirred a quiet unrest, a spark kindled by his uncle Bilbo, whose stories of mountains and dragons whispered of a world beyond the Shire's green embrace. This spark was soft-veiled by the Shire's calm, but it lingered like a seed awaiting spring's touch. That touch came with Gandalf the Grey Wanderer, whose knock at Bag End was like fate brushing against the heart. Picture it, a hobbit content in his smallness, reading by the fire when a wizard's shadow crosses the threshold. Gandalf spoke not of adventure, but of peril, of a ring left by Bilbo, a thing of power that could unravel all Frodo loved. Frodo listened, his heart sinking under a truth he could not yet grasp. The ring was his now, not by choice, but by chance, a burden passed from one small hand to another. Why did Frodo accept it? Not for renown, not for might, but because a part of him knew that to turn away would be to let the Shire's light dim. This is the first thread of our tale, the seed of duty that takes root in a heart, unready the choice to bear a weight when fear whispers of flight. So Frodo left the Shire, his steps faltering into a world of wonder and dread. He was not alone. Samwise Gamgee, Merry, Brandybuck, and Pippin Took walked with him, their voices a shield against the unknown. They faced the old forest where trees hummed with ancient anger, the Barrow Downs where cold hands reached from the earth, and the black riders whose pursuit was a chill that pierced the soul. Yet it was here in these early shadows that Frodo began to feel the ring's presence, a hum. In the stillness, a whisper that called his name. The ring was no ordinary thing. It was a will, a shard of Sauron's malice forged into gold, a force that sought its master and bent all others to its purpose. What is the ring? This golden circle that pulses with a hidden fire. It is not merely metal, but a voice, a temptation to command, to possess, to shape the world to one's will. It promises power, but its price is the soul's slow fading, the heart's quiet surrender to a shadow that grows with each breath. For Frodo, the ring was a mystery, a thing he tucked away, a secret he held close. He did not use it as Bilbo had to slip unseen through danger. He felt its weight, its tug, and in that feeling he began to sense its darkness, though its full truth remained cloaked. The ring watched. It waited. And in those early days Frodo became its bearer, though its voice was still a faint murmur. Let us linger on this road where the world was vast and the ring's shadow only beginning to creep. Frodo was not yet the weary pilgrim of Mordor's wastes, but a hobbit, small and uncertain, carrying a burden he did not seek. His companions were his light, their bond a warmth in the cold. Sam, with his steadfast love, was a rock, his devotion to Frodo a vow that held firm. Merry and Pippin, with their bold hearts, were a spark of the Shire's joy, a fire that burned even in fear. Yet even here Frodo felt a growing distance, a solitude that deepened with each step. The ring was his alone, to bear a weight no other could fully share. This solitude is the second thread of our tale, the isolation of a burden that sets the heart apart. To carry the ring was to walk a path alone, to hear its voice in the quiet when others slept. Frodo felt this, though he kept it silent. He saw it in the moments when the ring seemed to stir, when its gold grew warm against his skin, when its whisper spoke of safety, of a way to guard his friends from harm. But the ring's safety was a deception, and Frodo in his heart began to sense this truth. He felt it in the fear that shadowed him, in the darkness that lingered at the edge of his laughter, in the silence that fell when the stars shone bright. Let us pause on this silence, for it is a cornerstone of our story. The ring thrives in silence, in the spaces where no other voice can reach. It speaks when the heart is alone, when fear is loudest, when hope is faint. For Frodo, the silence was not yet a storm, but a ripple, a murmur that grew with each mile toward Rivendell. He did not yet know the ring's full power, but he felt its weight, a burden beyond gold, beyond metal. It was a shadow, a presence, a will that sought to thread itself into his own. And yet he walked, his small feet steady, his heart quaking but unbroken. The road to Rivendell was a crucible, forging Frodo's soul through trial. The Black Riders hunted, their cries a terror that sliced through the night. Frodo felt their gaze, their hunger for the ring, and in that hunger he glimpsed its true nature. At Weathertop, where ancient stones stood like ghosts, the riders struck their blades cold as death. Frodo, in a moment of desperation, slipped the ring onto his finger, and the world changed. He saw the riders as they were wraiths of shadow and flame, their eyes burning with a malice older than the earth. He saw the ring's power, its pull, and in that moment he felt its temptation, a voice promising strength, a way to stand against the dark. But the ring's strength was a lie, and Frodo, wounded by a Morgul blade, was carried to Rivendell, his body frail, his heart heavy, with a truth he could not yet name. In Rivendell, the house of Elrond, Frodo found a fleeting haven. The valley was a sanctuary, its air alive with the song of streams and the light of those elves, its beauty a balm to the soul. Here Frodo healed his wound, eased by Elrond's skill, his heart lifted by the grace of the last homely house. Yet the ring was there, a weight in his pocket, a shadow in his dreams. In the council of Elrond, where voices of elves, men, and dwarves clashed in debate, Frodo faced a moment of truth. The ring could not be hidden nor wielded nor kept. It must be destroyed, carried to Mordor, to the fires of Mount Doom, where it was forged. And Frodo, small and weary, spoke words that echoed through time. I will take the ring, though I do not know the way. What led Frodo to this choice? Not courage, for courage is the act, not the cause. Not wisdom, for Frodo was no sage. It was a quiet love, a duty to the Shire, a hope that the world could be more than the ring's shadow. This is the third thread of our tale, the awakening of purpose, the choice to bear a burden for others, though the heart trembles at its weight. Frodo did not seek the ring, but he claimed its task, a path that led to Mordor, to a land where the sky was fire and the earth was ash. He chose not because he was mighty, but because he was small, because he loved, because he hoped. Let us linger in Rivendell, where the light was soft and the ring's weight was heavy, and consider the fellowship that formed around Frodo. Gandalf, with his ancient knowledge, was a guide, his eyes holding a sorrow that saw the road ahead. Aragorn, heir of kings, was a guardian, his sword a vow of protection. Legolas, with his elven grace, and Gimli, with his dwarvish heart, were comrades, their bond a defiance of old feuds. Boromir, proud and troubled, was a mirror of temptation, his heart stirred by the ring's call. And Sam, Merry, and Pippin, hobbits of the Shire, were Frodo's soul, their loyalty a light that burned in the dark. This fellowship was Frodo's strength, though he did not yet know its depth, for the ring thrives in solitude, and love is its rebellion. Yet even in Rivendell the ring's voice was not still. It murmured to Frodo soft and subtle, speaking of fear, of failure, of a Shire that would burn despite his choice. It whispered of the life he had left, of a peace that could never return. Frodo listened, though he did not yield. He felt the ring's weight, its pull, and in that feeling he began to grasp its malice, a malice that sought not only to destroy, but to possess, to bend all hearts to its will. And yet he stood, his small form framed by Rivendell's ancient arches, his voice steady as he took the ring's burden. This standing, this choice, is the fourth thread of our tale, the courage of the small, the strength that rises not from power, but from the heart's quiet resolve. Frodo was no warrior, no king. He was a hobbit, a creature of earth and home, yet he bore a burden that would break the mighty. His choice in Rivendell was not a victory, but a beginning, a step into a darkness he could not fathom, guided by a light he could scarcely see. The road to Mordor was long, its end veiled, but Frodo walked his heart, heavy, his hope fragile, his strength a mystery even to himself. The stars above Rivendell sang of hope, of burdens borne and paths chosen. Frodo's road was meant his heart bound to a task that would test the soul to its breaking. The fellowship gathered their steps, a rhythm against the earth. The ring a weight in Frodo's pocket, a shadow in his soul. The mountains rose, the shadows deepened, and the ring's voice grew clearer, its whisper a companion that did not sleep. Frodo's journey was unfolding, his heart stretched thin, his hope a flame that flickered in the dark, leading him ever closer to Mordor's fires. The stars above the wild lands wavered like candles in a storm, their light a faint echo of Rivendell's glow, where Frodo Baggins had claimed a burden that trembled in his small hands. The Fellowship of the Ring moved through shadowed ravines and over jagged ridges, the One Ring a weight in Frodo's pocket, its whisper a shadow that deepened with each step. He had chosen to carry it to Mordor's fires, though the path was shrouded, and the strength to walk it a mystery woven into the silence of his heart. The road stretched before him, a ribbon of peril and hope, and in its winding the question lingered, how did Frodo find the strength to enter Mordor, to face a land where the earth itself seemed to choke on despair? The Fellowship left Rivendell under a sky bruised with winter's weight, their steps a quiet drum against the earth's cold heart. Gandalf led his staff, a faint shimmer in the dusk, his wisdom a shield against the creeping dark. Aragorn and Boromir, men of strength and shadow, guarded the flanks, their eyes sharp for the unseen. Legolas and Gimli, elf and dwarf, brought grace and fire, their bond a spark that defied ancient rifts. And the hobbits, Sam, Merry, and Pippin, were Frodo's tethers, their voices a memory of the Shire's warmth, their loyalty a light that burned even in the wild. Yet Frodo walked apart the ring, a secret he could not share, a weight that pressed against his soul like a stone too heavy to lift. What is it to bear a burden that isolates the heart, to hear a shadow that speaks when the world is silent, that knows your fears before you name them? For Frodo, the ring was no longer a mystery but a presence, its voice clearer now, its tug a constant pull. It murmured of safety, of power, of a way to shield his friends, to save the Shire from Sauron's flame. But the ring's promises were hollow, and Frodo, though he did not yet fully grasp its malice, began to feel its toll. He felt it in the weariness that seeped into his bones, in the dream that twisted into shadow, in the moments when the ring's gold seemed to hum with a life not its own. This weariness is the fifth thread of our tale, the slow erosion of the soul under a burden's weight. The ring did not wound with steel or fire, but with a quiet theft, a draining of joy that left only duty in its place. Frodo sensed this, though he kept it locked within. He saw it in the moments when his friend's laughter grew faint, when the road stretched endless before him, when the ring's warmth burned against his skin. He was still a hobbit, still Frodo of the Shire, but he was changing, his heart stretched thin, his hope a fragile thread that quivered in the dark. The road was a forge, tempering the fellowship's bond and Frodo's resolve. On the slopes of Caradhras, where the mountain's wrath roared with snow and wind, Frodo felt the ring's weight, a cold that pierced deeper than the storm. The fellowship faltered, their strength no match for the mountain's will, and Frodo, small and shivering, heard the ring's whisper urging him to use its power, to bend the world to his need. He did not yield, but the temptation was there, a shadow that grew with each trial. This is the sixth thread of our tale, the temptation that tests the heart, the choice to resist when the path of power seems easier than the path of hope. The snows of Caradhras were a crucible, revealing the fragility of even the strongest bonds. The fellowship's unity strained under the mountain's fury, and Frodo, though surrounded by friends, felt the ring's voice, a solitary call that promised relief, control, escape. He clutched it hidden beneath his cloak, and the gold seemed to pulse a heartbeat that was not his own. Yet he walked on his small feet, sinking into the snow, his heart heavy with a burden he could not share. Sam's hand steadied him, a touch that spoke of the Shire of love that did not waver, and in that touch Frodo found a flicker of strength, a reminder that he was not alone. The fellowship turned from Caradhras, driven by necessity, into the mines of Moria, where the shadows of a lost kingdom whispered of sorrow. The halls of Khazad-dûm were vast, their stone carved with the grief of ages, and Frodo felt the ring's weight grow heavier, as if the darkness fed its malice. Goblins swarmed like shadows, their cries a jagged edge in the silence. A troll's roar shook the stone, its bulk a terror in the gloom. Frodo, small among the warriors, heard the ring's voice louder now, urging him to vanish, to flee. He did not, but the temptation was a wound, a crack in his resolve that let the shadow seep deeper. And then came the Balrog, a demon of fire and shadow, its presence a flame that burned the air. Gandalf stood against it on the bridge of Khazad-dûm, his light a defiance of the dark, but the cost was great. Frodo watched, his heart a storm of fear and grief, as Gandalf fell consumed by the abyss, his voice a fading echo in the stone. The loss was a blade cutting through the fellowship's hope, and Frodo's heart shattered not only for the wizard, but for the light that seemed to fall with him. This is the seventh thread of our tale, the loss that tests the soul, the pain that threatens to quench hope yet kindles a deeper strength. The air in Moria was thick with grief, the fellowship's steps heavy as they fled the mines. Frodo felt the ring, its voice soft but relentless, promising power to prevent such loss, to hold the world against the dark. But Frodo, though tempted, did not yield. He walked on his small form, bowed under the weight of sorrow, his hope a fragile flame that flickered in the shadow. Aragorn led them now, his face etched with resolve, but Frodo's heart was elsewhere, caught in the silence where Gandalf's voice had been, where the ring's whisper grew louder, a constant companion that did not sleep. The fellowship emerged into the golden woods of Lothlorien, where the light of the Lady Galadriel was a balm to the soul. The trees of Lorien glowed with a radiance older than the sun, their branches a canopy of peace, and Frodo found a moment of rest, a stillness that softened the ring's voice. Galadriel, with her eyes that saw through the veil of time, met Frodo's gaze, and in her presence he felt both known and exposed. She led him to her mirror, a basin of water that showed truths unbidden, and there Frodo saw a vision, the Shire in flames, its hills blackened, its people enslaved under Sauron's shadow. The sight was a wound, a glimpse of what the ring could rot if he failed. Galadriel spoke of the ring's burden, of the cost of bearing it, her voice, a melody of sorrow and strength. To bear a ring of power is to be alone, she said, and in her words Frodo saw a truth. The ring was not his to wield, but to destroy a task that would break him, yet might save the world. She too was tempted. Her heart stirred by the ring's promise of dominion, yet she chose to remain herself, to diminish and pass into the West. In her choice, Frodo saw a reflection of his own, a reminder that resistance was possible, that the ring's power was not absolute. This is the eighth thread of our tale, the clarity of truth, the moment when the heart sees the path, though it is steeped in pain. The light of Lothlorien was a gift, but it could not silence the ring. Its voice returned sharper now, speaking of betrayal, of a fellowship that could not shield him, of a task too vast for a hobbit's heart. Frodo listened, his soul torn between duty and dread, between love for his friends and the solitude of his burden. The fellowship rested in Lorien, their wounds tended, their hearts lifted by the elves' song. But Frodo felt the ring's weight, a burning gold that seemed to call to others as well. Boromir's eyes lingered on him, his words heavy with a longing that Frodo recognized, a longing the ring had kindled, a desire to use its power for good. The Anduin carried the fellowship south, its waters a mirror of the sky's fading light. Frodo sat in the boat, the ring, a weight that pulled at his heart, its voice a constant murmur. Boromir's presence was a shadow, his words a plea to use the ring, to wield it against Sauron, to save Gondor and the world. Frodo felt the ring's temptation not only in himself, but in Boromir, a man whose love was a fire the ring could twist into despair. And when Boromir, driven by his own heart's breaking, tried to take the ring, Frodo's world fractured. He saw the ring's power, its ability to poison even the strongest bonds, to turn love into hunger. He fled the ring, a burning weight, his heart heavy with the choice he could not avoid. On the banks of the Anduin, Frodo stood alone, the ring's gold warm in his hand, its voice loud now, promising safety, strength, escape. He slipped it onto his finger, vanished, and in that moment he felt the ring's pull, a tide that sought to drown him. The world was gray, the fellowship distant, and Frodo saw the path ahead. Mordor, a land of fire and ash where the ring must end. He chose to go alone, not out of pride, but out of love, to spare his friends the ring's shadow, to bear the burden himself. This is the ninth thread of our tale, the necessity of solitude, the choice to walk alone, not for glory, but for the sake of others. But Frodo was not alone. Sam steadfast. Sam followed his love, a promise that would not break. Through the river's cold embrace, Sam reached him, his voice a light in the dark. "I'm going with you." In those words, Frodo found a strength he did not know. He had a strength born of love, of trust, of a bond that the ring could not sever. Sam's presence was a defiance, a reminder that even in solitude the heart is not forsaken. Frodo and Sam set out, the fellowship scattered the ring, a weight that grew with each step. The road to Mordor was long, its end hidden, but Frodo walked, his heart heavy, his hope fragile, his strength a mystery that deepened with each trial. The Anduin's waters faded behind them, the world growing harsher, the stars dimmer as Frodo and Sam moved toward the unknown. The ring was there, its voice a relentless companion, its weight a shadow that swelled in the silence. Frodo's journey was shifting, his heart stretched thinner, his hope a flame that flickered in the dark. The path to Mordor was a thread in a tapestry. He could not see, a song of love and loss, of faith and fear, leading him ever closer to the fires where the ring must end. The horizon swallowed the stars as Frodo Baggins and Samwise Gamgee ventured into the jagged wilds, the Anduin's silver thread fading behind them. The One Ring, a burning weight in Frodo's pocket. The world grew harsh, its stones sharp, its skies heavy, with a gloom that pressed against the heart. The ring's whisper was a constant shadow, its voice weaving through the silence, speaking of despair, of a task too vast for a hobbit's frail strength. Frodo walked his steps, small but steady, his soul stretched thin by a burden that grew with each mile. Yet the question lingered like a breath held in the dark. How did Frodo find the strength to enter Mordor, to tread a land where hope itself seemed to crumble into ash? The path from the Anduin was a wound in the earth, twisting through barren hills and shadowed vales. Frodo and Sam moved alone, the Fellowship's light, now a memory, their small forms dwarfed by a world that cared nothing for their quest. Sam was Frodo's anchor, his love a steady flame, his voice a reminder of the Shire's green hills. Yet Frodo felt the ring's pull, a tide that sought to drown him, its voice louder now, speaking of failure, of a world that would fall despite his sacrifice. The ring was no longer a secret, but a presence, its gold, a fire that burned against his skin, its will a shadow that clung to his heart. What is it to walk with a burden that knows your name, to carry a weight that speaks in the quiet, that twists your hopes into fears? For Frodo, the ring was a relentless companion, its voice a murmur that grew into a roar. It promised power, a way to end the pain, to shield Sam, to save the Shire from Sauron's wrath. But the ring's promises were lies, and Frodo, though weary, began to see its truth. He felt it in the exhaustion that clawed at his soul, in the dreams that turned to ash, in the moments when the ring seemed to pulse with a malice that was not his own. This exhaustion is the 10th thread of our tale, the wearing of the spirit under a burden's unyielding weight. The ring did not strike with force, but with a slow unraveling, a theft of light that left only duty in its wake. Frodo sensed this, though he did not speak it. He saw it in the moments when Sam's laughter grew rare, when the path seemed to loop back on itself, when the ring's gold felt heavier than the world. He was still Frodo, still a hobbit of the Shire, but he was fading his heart, a thread pulled taut, his hope a spark that flickered in the gloom. The wilds were a crucible testing Frodo's resolve and Sam's steadfast love. The Emyn Muil rose before them, a labyrinth of stone where the earth itself seemed to conspire against their steps. Frodo stumbled, his body frail, his heart heavy with the ring's shadow. Sam was there, his hands steady, his voice a quiet song of home, but Frodo felt the ring's voice, a siren call that promised rest power escape. He clutched it hidden beneath his cloak, and the gold seemed to hum, a heartbeat that drowned his own. Yet he did not yield, though the temptation was a wound that bled deep within his soul. In this barren land, a new shadow joined their path, Gollum, the creature who had once borne the ring, his form twisted by its long malice. Gollum was a mirror, a vision of what Frodo might become, his eyes burning with a hunger that was both love and hate for the ring he called precious. Frodo saw him, and pity stirred, a pity born of the memory of Bilbo's mercy, of a choice to spare what was broken. He did not trust Gollum, but he bound him, making him swear to guide them to Mordor's gates. This is the 11th thread of our tale, the pity that tempers the heart, the choice to see the other even when they are lost to shadow, and to offer mercy where judgment might prevail. Gollum led them through the Emyn Muil, his steps quick and crooked, his voice a hiss that wove through the silence. Frodo felt the ring's weight, its pull stronger in Gollum's presence, as if it sensed its former bearer and yearned to return. The creature's eyes lingered on Frodo, on the chain around his neck where the ring hung, and Frodo saw the ring's power not only over himself, but over all who had touched it. Gollum was a warning, a shadow of the ring's end, yet Frodo's pity held a light that burned against the dark, though it did not ease the burden. The path led to the dead marshes, a wasteland where the earth was soft with decay, where pools of water held the faces of the fallen, their eyes empty, their hands reaching. Frodo walked his heart heavy with the ring's shadow, his steps guided by Gollum's whispers. The marshes were a mirror of despair, a place where hope seemed to drown, and the ring's voice grew louder, speaking of surrender, of a world where resistance was futile. Frodo felt its pull, a tide that sought to drag him under, but Sam's voice was there, steady and sure, calling him back, reminding him of the Shire of love that did not falter. This calling is the 12th thread of our tale, the strength of love, the bond that holds when the heart is breaking, the light that shines when all else fades. Sam's love was Frodo's lifeline, a thread that tethered him to the world, to hope, to the memory of green hills and laughter. In the dead marshes where the air was thick with loss, Sam's presence was a defiance, a reminder that the ring's power was not absolute, that love could endure where despair sought to reign. Frodo leaned on this love, though he did not speak it, his heart too heavy with the ring's weight, his hope too fragile to name. The marshes gave way to the slag heaps of the Morannon, the black gate of Mordor, a wall of iron and fire that barred the way. Frodo stood before it, his small form dwarfed by its malice, the ring, a burning weight that seemed to call to the darkness beyond. Gollum whispered of another path, a secret way through the mountains, and Frodo, weary and wary, chose to follow his heart, torn between trust and fear. The Black Gate was a vision of the task's immensity, a reminder that Mordor was no mere place, but a force, a shadow that sought to crush all light. Frodo felt this, his soul quaking, but he walked on his steps, guided by a strength he could not yet name. The path to Ithilien was a fleeting respite, a land of green and water, where the air was soft with the scent of herbs. Frodo and Sam rested, their bodies weary, their hearts heavy with the ring's shadow. Here they met Faramir, Boromir's brother, a man whose eyes held sorrow and strength. Faramir saw the ring, felt its pull, but chose to let Frodo go, his heart unswayed by its promise of power. In Faramir's choice, Frodo saw a reflection of hope, a reminder that the ring's temptation could be resisted, that the world was not yet its own. This is the 13th thread of our tale, the hope that endures, the light that burns in others, a spark that kindles the heart when it falters. Ithilien's beauty was a balm, but it could not silence the ring. Its voice was a constant murmur, speaking of betrayal, of Gollum's hunger, of a task that would break him. Frodo felt its weight heavier now, a chain that bound his heart to Mordor's fires. He saw Gollum's eyes, their hunger, a mirror of the ring's malice, and doubted his pity tested by fear. Sam was there, his love a steady flame, but Frodo's heart was sinking, his hope a spark that flickered in the shadow. The path led upward into the mountains of Ithilien, where the secret way to Mordor waited, a path of stone and shadow that Gollum promised would lead to the end. The climb was a trial, each step a battle against the ring's weight. Frodo's body was frail, his soul stretched thin, but Sam's strength held him, his hands steady, his voice a quiet song of home. Gollum led his form, a shadow that danced in the dark, his whispers a thread that wove through the silence. Frodo felt the ring, its gold a fire that burned his heart, its voice a tide that sought to drown him. He walked his steps small but steady, his hope a fragile thing that burned against the dark, guided by a strength he could not yet name. The mountains rose, their stones sharp, their shadows deep. Frodo felt the ring's pull, its voice a constant companion, speaking of despair, of a world that would fall, of a hobbit too small to bear its weight. Sam's love was there, a light that burned in the gloom, but Frodo's heart was heavy, his soul torn between duty and dread. Gollum's presence was a shadow, his hunger a warning, his whispers a thread that led deeper into the dark. The path to Mordor was narrowing its end, hidden, but Frodo walked his heart, a flame that flickered in the silence, his strength a mystery that grew with each step. The stars above Ithilien were faint, their light a whisper against the gathering dark. Frodo and Sam climbed the ring. A weight that burned its voice, a shadow that clung to their steps. Gollum led, his eyes burning with a hunger that was both love and hate, his path, a thread that wove through the mountains toward a darkness that waited. Frodo's journey was deepening, his heart stretched thinner, his hope a spark that burned in the shadow, leading him ever closer to Mordor's fires. The mountains of Ithilien loomed like silent sentinels, their jagged peaks clawing at a sky where stars struggled to pierce the gathering gloom. Frodo Baggins and Samwise Gamgee climbed their steps, faltering on the unforgiving stone, the one ring, a searing weight around Frodo's neck, its whisper a shadow that wove through the silence. Gollum led, his crooked form a flicker in the dark, his eyes glinting with a hunger that mirrored the ring's own malice. The path to Mordor was a thread of pain, each step a battle against a burden that sought to break the soul. Yet the question lingered like a breath caught in the throat of night. How did Frodo find the strength to enter Mordor? To face a land where hope itself seemed to dissolve into ash? The air grew thin, the world harsher as Frodo and Sam followed Gollum's winding trail through the mountains. The ring was a constant presence, its gold a fire that burned against Frodo's heart, its voice a tide that swelled in the quiet. It spoke of despair, of a task too vast for a hobbit's frail frame, of a world that would fall despite his sacrifice. Frodo's body was weary, his soul stretched to breaking, but Sam's love was a steady flame, his hand a tether to the Shire's green memory. Gollum's whispers were a shadow, his promises of a secret way to Mordor laced with a hunger that Frodo felt in his bones, a hunger the ring fed with every step. What is it to walk a path where the shadow knows your heart? To carry a weight that speaks in the stillness, that twists your hope into dread? For Frodo, the ring was a relentless force, its voice a storm that roared in the silence. It promised release, a way to end the pain, to shield Sam, to save the Shire from Sauron's fire. But the ring's promises were lies, and Frodo, though faltering, began to see its truth. He felt it in the exhaustion that clawed at his soul, in the dreams that crumbled into ash, in the moments when the ring's gold seemed to pulse with a will that sought to claim him. This exhaustion is the 14th thread of our tale, the breaking of the spirit under a burden's unyielding weight. The ring did not wound with blade or flame, but with a slow unraveling, a theft of light that left only duty in its wake. Frodo sensed this, though he kept it locked within. He saw it in the moments when Sam's eyes grew heavy with worry, when the path seemed to vanish into shadow, when the ring's chain bit into his neck. He was still Frodo, still a hobbit of the Shire, but he was fading, his heart a thread fraying at the edges, his hope a spark that trembled in the gloom. The path led to Cirith Ungol, a pass of stone and shadow where the air was thick with menace. Gollum's whispers grew sharper, his eyes burning with a hunger that Frodo could not ignore. The creature's presence was a wound, a reminder of the ring's power to twist even the smallest heart. Frodo's pity for Gollum held, but it was tested, strained by fear, by the ring's voice that spoke of betrayal of a guide who served only his own desire. Sam's love was a shield, his voice a quiet song of home, but Frodo's heart was sinking, his trust in Gollum, a fragile thing that the ring sought to break. The climb to Cirith Ungol was a trial, each step a battle against the ring's weight. Frodo's body was frail, his soul stretched to its limit, but Sam's strength held him, his hands steady, his words a whisper of the Shire's green hills. Gollum led, his form a shadow that danced in the dark, his whispers a thread that wove through the silence. Frodo felt the ring, its gold a fire that burned his heart, its voice a tide that sought to drown him. He walked his steps small but steady, his hope a fragile thing that burned against the dark, guided by a strength he could not yet name. The pass opened to a tunnel, a maw of stone that swallowed the light. Gollum urged them forward, his voice a hiss that echoed in the dark, but Frodo felt a chill, a warning that stirred in his heart. The tunnel was a trap, a lair where Shelob, a creature of ancient malice, wove her webs. Frodo entered the ring, a burning weight, its voice a shadow that clung to his steps. The air was thick, the darkness alive with a hunger that was not Gollum's, and Frodo's heart quaked, his hope a spark that flickered in the gloom. Sam was there, his love, a light that burned in the dark, but the ring's weight was a chain pulling Frodo deeper into the shadow. Shelob struck her webs, a snare, her venom, a fire that burned through Frodo's veins. He felt his body limp, his heart silent, the ring, a weight that seemed to claim him at last. Sam fought his love, a sword that cut through the dark, driving Shelob back. But Frodo was lost, his form, still his hope, a flame that seemed to fade. Sam took the ring, his heart breaking, his love, a vow that would not yield. He carried Frodo, his small form heavy with loss, and in that moment Sam became the bearer, though his heart was bound to Frodo, not to the ring's malice. This is the 15th thread of our tale, the sacrifice of love, the choice to bear another's burden, to hold the light when the heart is breaking. The tunnel's darkness gave way to the harsh light of Cirith Ungol's tower, where orcs took Frodo. His body bound, his heart silent. Sam followed the ring, a weight he did not claim, his love for Frodo, a fire that burned through fear. Frodo woke in the tower, his body broken, his soul stretched to its breaking, the ring gone from his neck, its absence a wound as deep as its presence. He felt its loss, a longing that the ring had woven into his heart, but Sam was there, his voice a light that pierced the dark, his hands returning the ring, his love a promise that held fast. The return of the ring was a moment of truth, a mirror of Frodo's burden. He took it, his hands trembling, its gold, a fire that burned anew, its voice a storm that roared in the silence. He saw Sam's love, his sacrifice, and in that seeing he found a strength he did not know. He had a strength born of trust, of a bond that the ring could not break. Yet the ring's weight was heavier now, its malice a tide that sought to drown him, its whisper a promise of power that was a poison. Frodo stood, his heart heavy, his body frail, but Sam's presence was enough, a spark that kindled his hope, a flame that burned in the shadow. The tower was a prison, but Sam's love was a key, a light that led them out. They escaped their steps, faltering on the stone, the ring, a weight that burned with every breath. Frodo felt its pull, its voice, a constant companion speaking of despair, of a world that would fall, of a hobbit too small to bear it. But Sam was there, his hand steady, his heart, a song of the Shire of love that did not falter. The path led them to the borders of Mordor, a land of blackened earth and fiery skies where the air was thick with ash, and the ring's weight was a chain that bound to its will. The edge of Mordor was a vision of the end, a land where hope seemed to dissolve, where the ring's shadow was absolute. Frodo stood, his small form dwarfed by the mountains of ash, the ring, a burning weight that seemed to call to the darkness within. He felt its pull, its voice a temptation to surrender, to claim its power, to end the pain in its embrace. But Sam's love was a shield, a reminder of the Shire, of a world worth fighting for, of a hope that could not be quenched. Frodo walked his steps, a fragile rhythm, his heart a light that flickered in the dark, guided by a strength he did not yet name. This is the 16th thread of our tale, the endurance of hope, the spark that burns when the world seems lost, the strength that rises from the love of others, from the memory of light. Frodo's hope was not a certainty but a choice, a willingness to walk though the path was bleak, to believe that the ring might end, that the world might endure. Sam's presence was its fuel, his love a fire that burned in the heart, a reminder that even in the shadow of Mordor, the smallest could stand against the dark. The land of Mordor was a furnace, its air thick with ash, its ground scarred with the fires of Sauron's wrath. Frodo and Sam moved through it, their bodies frail, their hearts heavy with the ring's weight. Gollum followed his shadow, a constant threat, his hunger a mirror of the ring's malice. Frodo felt the ring its gold, a fire that burned his soul, its voice a tide that sought to drown him. He walked his steps small but steady, his hope a fragile thing that burned against the dark, guided by Sam's love, by a strength that grew in the silence. The path to Mount Doom was a thread of pain, each step a battle against the ring's weight. Frodo's body was breaking, his soul stretched to its limit, but Sam's strength held him, his hands steady, his voice a whisper of home. Gollum's presence was a shadow, his whispers a thread that wove through the dark, his hunger a warning of the ring's end. Frodo felt the ring, its gold a fire that burned his heart, its voice a storm that roared in the silence. He walked his steps, faltering his hope, a spark that flickered in the gloom, guided by a strength he could not yet name. The fires of Mount Doom loomed, their light a wound in the sky, their heat a promise of the ring's end. Frodo felt its pull, its voice a constant companion, speaking of despair, of a world that would fall, of a hobbit too small to bear it. Sam was there, his love a light that burned in the dark, his hand a tether to the Shire's green memory. Frodo's heart was heavy, his body frail, but he walked his steps a fragile rhythm, his hope a flame that flickered in the shadow, leading him ever closer to the end. The mountains of Mordor rose, their stones sharp, their shadows deep. Frodo felt the ring's weight, its voice a relentless companion, its malice a tide that sought to drown him. Sam's love was there, a spark that burned in the gloom, but Frodo's heart was sinking, his soul torn between duty and dread. Gollum's shadow followed his hunger, a warning, his whispers a thread that led deeper into the dark. The path to the fire was narrowing, its end a mystery, but Frodo walked his heart a flame that flickered in the silence, his strength a mystery that grew with each step. The fires of Mount Doom cast a sickly glow over Mordor's blackened earth, their heat a wound in the sky that bled ash and shadow. Frodo Baggins stumbled through the jagged wastes, his body a husk, his breath ragged the One Ring, a searing weight around his neck that burned with a malice older than the stones beneath him. Samwise Gamgee walked beside him, his love a fragile light in the suffocating dark, his steps a steady rhythm against the land's despair. Gollum trailed a crooked shadow, his eyes glinting with a hunger that mirrored the ring's own will. The path to the mountain was a thread of agony, each step a battle against a burden that sought to crush the soul, yet the question lingered like a whisper, caught in the throat of night. How did Frodo find the strength to deliver the One Ring to Mordor, to face a land where hope itself seemed to dissolve into dust? The air was thick with ash, the ground scarred with the fires of Sauron's wrath. Frodo's body was breaking, his soul stretched to its limit, the ring a chain that bound him to its will. Its voice was a storm roaring in the silence, speaking of surrender, of a world that would fall, of a hobbit too small to bear its weight. It promised release, a way to end the pain, to claim its power and bend the world to his heart. But the ring's promises were poison, and Frodo, though faltering, felt their lie. He saw it in the desolation around him, in the dreams that crumbled into ash, in the moments when the ring's gold seemed to pulse with a malice that sought to claim him. This desolation is the 17th thread of our tale, the annihilation of the self under a burden's relentless weight. The ring did not wound with steel, but with a slow erasure, a theft of light that left only a shadow of the heart. Frodo felt this, his silence a shield against the pain. He saw it in the moments when Sam's voice grew faint, when the mountain loomed like a judge, when the ring's chain bit down into his flesh. He was still Frodo, still a hobbit of the Shire, but he was fading, his heart a frayed thread, his hope a spark that trembled in the gloom. The path to Mount Doom was a crucible forging Frodo's soul through fire and shadow. The ground was treacherous, its stones sharp, its air a choke of ash that burned the lungs. Frodo stumbled, his body frail, his heart heavy with the ring's shadow. Sam was there, his hands steady, his voice a whisper of the Shire's green hills, but Frodo's soul was sinking, the ring's voice a tide that sought to drown him. Gollum followed his shadow, a constant threat, his hunger a mirror of the ring's malice. Frodo felt the creature's eyes, their burning a warning of the ring's end, and his pity wavered, strained by fear, by the weight that pulled him toward the fire. The climb was a torment, each step a battle against the ring's weight. Frodo's body was a shell, his soul stretched to breaking, but Sam's love held him, his strength, a tether to the world. The ring's voice was relentless, speaking of despair, of a task too vast, of a hobbit too weak to see it through. Frodo felt its pull, a temptation to surrender, to claim its power, to end the pain in its embrace. But Sam's presence was a light, a reminder of the Shire of love that did not falter, of a hope that could not be quenched. Frodo walked his steps, faltering his heart, a flame that flickered in the dark, guided by a strength he could not yet name. The mountain loomed, its fires a wound in the earth, their heat a promise of the ring's end. Frodo felt the ring's weight, its gold, a fire that burned his soul. Its voice, a storm that roared in the silence. He saw Sam's face etched with sorrow and strength, and in that seeing he found a spark, a flicker of the Shire's light that the ring could not touch. But the ring was there, its malice, a tide that sought to drown him, its whisper a promise of power that was a poison. Frodo's heart was heavy, his body frail, but he climbed his steps, a fragile rhythm, his hope a spark that burned in the shadow. Gollum's shadow grew closer, his hunger a blade that cut through the silence. Frodo felt the creature's presence, his pity tested by fear, by the ring's voice that spoke of betrayal, of a guide who served only his own desire. Sam's love was a shield, but Frodo's heart was sinking, his trust a fragile thing that the ring sought to break. The path narrowed, the mountain's fires a beacon that burned the air, and Frodo felt the ring's pull, its voice a temptation to claim its power, to end the pain in its embrace. He walked his steps small but steady, his hope a fragile thing that burned against the dark. The Samath Nor. The chambers of fire opened before them, a maw of flame and shadow where the ring was forged. Frodo stood at the edge, the ring a burning weight, its voice a storm that roared in his heart. He saw the fires, their heat a promise of the end, and felt the ring's pull, its malice, a tide that sought to drown him. Sam was there, his love a light that pierced the dark, his voice a plea to cast the ring into the flame. But Frodo's heart was breaking, his soul stretched to its limit, the ring's voice a promise of power that was a poison. He turned his eyes burning with a fire not his own, and spoke words that cut through the silence. The ring is mine. This moment, this breaking, is the 18th thread of our tale, the temptation that overcomes the moment, when the heart falters, when the burden's weight is too great to bear. Frodo did not cast the ring into the fire, but claimed it, its power, a lie that seemed a truth, its promise a chain that bound his soul. The ring's malice was absolute, its voice a storm that drowned his hope, and Frodo, small and weary, fell to its will, his heart a shadow of the hobbit he had been. But the tale did not end in shadow. Gollum, driven by his own hunger, struck his hands, clawing for the ring, his eyes burning with a malice that was both love and hate. He took it, tearing it from Frodo's hand, and in his triumph he stumbled, falling into the fires of Mount Doom. The ring was consumed, its gold melting into the flame, its malice undone in a moment of chance, of fate, of a pity that had spared Gollum long ago. Frodo watched his heart a storm of loss and relief, his soul stretched thin but not broken, his hope a spark that flickered in the dark. This is the 19th thread of our tale, the redemption of pity, the strength that lies in mercy, in the choices that ripple through time, unseen but unfading. Frodo's pity for Gollum, born in the shadow of the Emyn Muil, had woven a thread that led to this moment, a thread that the ring could not break. Gollum's fall was no victory but a revelation, a truth that the ring's power was not absolute, that even in failure hope could endure, that even in darkness light could return. The mountain trembled, its fires raging, its stones falling, as Sauron's shadow collapsed. Frodo and Sam fled, their bodies frail, their hearts heavy with the weight of what had passed. They found refuge on a rock amid the ash, the world breaking around them, and there in the silence, Frodo felt the ring's absence, a wound that was also a freedom. He saw Sam's face etched with love and sorrow, and in that seeing he found a strength he did not know. He had a strength born of love, of trust, of a bond that the ring could not sever. This is the 20th thread of our tale, the revelation of love. The truth that love is not a shield but a light, not a chain but a freedom, not an end but a beginning. Frodo's strength was not in the ring, but in Sam, in the Shire, in the hope that burned through the darkest night. He had not cast the ring into the fire, but he had carried it, borne its weight, walked its path, and in that walking he had kindled a light that the ring could not quench. The eagles came, their wings a shadow against the flame, and bore Frodo and Sam from the ruin of Mordor. Frodo woke in Ithilien, the air soft with the scent of green, his body healing, his heart heavy with the memory of the ring. He saw Sam's face, his laughter a song of the Shire, and felt a peace that was both joy and sorrow. The ring was gone, its shadow lifted, but its scar remained, a longing that lingered in the quiet, a wound that did not fully heal. Frodo was changed, his soul marked by the burden he had borne, his hope a flame that burned in the silence. The Shire waited, its hills green, its light a call to home. Frodo returned, but he was not the hobbit he had been. The ring's weight was gone, but its echo lingered, a shadow that stirred in the quiet, a memory that burned in the dark. He lived, he loved, he wrote his tale, but his heart was elsewhere, drawn to a horizon he could not name. In the gray havens he chose to sail, to pass into the west, to find a peace that the Shire could not hold. Sam was there, his love a light that did not falter, his farewell a wound that was also a gift. And so we come to the end of our journey, not with answers, but with a song that fades into the memory of stars. How did Frodo find the strength to deliver the One Ring to Mordor? It was duty born in the Shire's green hills that set his feet upon the path. It was love kindled in Sam's steadfast heart that held him when he faltered. It was pity shown to a creature lost to shadow that wove a thread through time. It was hope, a spark in the dark that trusted in a world beyond the ring. These were the threads of his strength, woven into a tapestry that stretched through the ages, a tapestry of smallness, of sacrifice, of a hobbit who carried a weight and let it fall. Frodo's tale is not a resolution, but a revelation, a truth that speaks to the heart of the human condition. We all carry rings, burdens that whisper our names, that promise power but demand our souls. We all face paths, moments when the heart must choose, when the soul must hope, when the hand must open. Frodo's strength was his own, yet it is ours, a mirror of the battles fought in silence, of the light that shines in darkness, of the love that endures when all else fades. The stars above the gray havens sang of a world that endured, of choices that shaped the fate of many, of small hands that held the light against the dark. Frodo's song was fading, his voice a whisper, but it was not lost. It lingered in Sam's love, in the Shire's green hills, in the world he had helped to save. And as we leave him sailing into the west, we hear the echo of his journey, a melody that does not end but fades into the memory of stars, a song of a hobbit who bore the ring, and of the light that shone in darkness, unbroken, undimmed, eternal.